Hi everyone, Elsie Jensen here. Tonight we are going to make some Wiener Schnitzel with some German fried potatoes, fried cabbage, and some homemade soft pretzels. So we're kind of doing a little bit of a German theme because we're going to be doing our German yum box that we got, which the kids have been asking for. And what better to do on a snow day? So we've got lots of little German snacks and treats that we're going to try up. So we, of course, got to have a little German meal to go with it. So let's start by getting our potatoes dropped in there boiling for our German fried potatoes. Essentially what we're going to do is you're going to take a nice kind of waxy potato like a Yukon, a new potato, red potato. You'll boil them and then after they've boiled for a little while, nice and tender, we'll dice them up and then we'll fry them with some bacon and onions and add some green onions and salt. So they'll be delicious, but we're going to get them boiling first, make them kind of tender. So it's kind of a mix between a boiled and a fried potato. And in a little bit, we'll shape up our pretzels and we'll boil those off and bake those. But let's get our Wiener Schnitzel, which we're actually going to be doing pork chops instead of veal. But we're going to get those prepped and ready for the dredging part. So I've got 8 kind of pork chops here. We are actually going to fillet them, or more like I'm going to butterfly them so they're a little less thick, and then we'll pound them out. So I'm just going to kind of cut them right through the middle, and then I'm going through that fat vein side to kind of separate it up, but not all the way through because I'm leaving them fairly thick or fairly like big so that when I pound them out, we'll have this nice kind of big piece of schnitzel. So we'll go through that. I'm going to fillet them. Now you can always cut off this fat strip at the end as well if you want to. I'm going to add it on there, keep it on there. It'll add a nice little touch of flavor when it crisps up since I'm leaving it on the very end. You could also do this dish with chicken as well, or if you have veal, veal works wonderful. That's the original. Pop it there. So we've got 2 down. And kind of get these going. And that way, again, with Wiener Schnitzel, with Schnitzel in general, we're going to pound it out, but you need to pound it out fairly thin. That way you'll fry it up faster and quicker. And the reason why you want to fry it a little bit faster and quicker is we are going to be putting a little bit of butter in our oil to give it a great flavor to it. A lot of times they'll cook it up in straight, like in a nice clarified butter. But I don't have any clarified butter today, and I really didn't want to go through the work to melt it and clarify it. So we're just going to be kind of adding a little bit of butter to our oil so we still get those flavors, but I don't have to worry so much about the burning of the milk solids. There we go. So part of them down, 4 left to go. Here. And you could also just, if you want to keep smaller, you could buy those thin pork chops that you get, the thin cut ones at the grocery stores. Those work as well. But, it was Snowmageddon here, which is really had turned into Ice-mageddon. And this is kind of what we had. So, but it'll make pretty cool, nice big ones for it. And then we're going to pound them down to about 1/4 of an inch in thickness. So you don't want them too thick.
You have a question. Would you ever consider joining Food Network as a chef?
I get asked that a lot. It would have to be under certain circumstances. I mean, if Food Network came to me and asked me, I would totally be like, yes, I'd probably have stars in my eyes. But, I'd always have to consider what would be in the best interest for my family and everything like that. And I feel like I'd be so nervous on one of those things because, I feel like I'm a really good, home cook. Like I make good comfort food for our family. I'm not super into making it, bougie presentation. I'd have to work on my presentation game because that is a really big component of, that making it look beautiful. I'm going to cut this one because it's a pretty pretty thick strip of fat. So, I mean, if they ever came, I would, I'd probably, find a way to make it work, maybe depending on what the show was. But I don't know. It's such a daunting thing.
Well, what's your best tips for making pork tender?
So for pork tender, if you're gonna not do like a fry up on it, I find that you want to use some sort of like a marinade that has some sort of like acidity to it. I love to use Worcestershire sauce, but you could also do like an Italian vinaigrette, something that will help cut through the natural fat in pork, which will break it down and make it nice and juicy. And then the second thing is you just can't overcook it. Pork gets really tough really fast if you overcook. So just being really cognizant when you're cooking it for it. Okay, we've got ours filleted up here. Now we're just gonna use our little mallet here and we're gonna pound them out. Again, if you want them to be really pretty, you could put it between two pieces of parchment paper and then kind of hammer it out, but this works just fine. There we go. But again, nice thin strip like that. So as you can see, they are going to grow in size. And this will allow them to cook up nice and thin and evenly and quickly when you're doing it. So that's also the beauty of it. This will also, the tenderizing of this will cause it to get nice and tender as well. And it's kind of fun. And it's much easier with a meat tenderizer than if you're going to use a makeshift garlic press, which is what I used for many, many years until I finally was like, you know what? I make enough, I tenderize enough meat to warrant buying the $10 tenderizer. There we go. So we'll get those out. But again, you'll have these just nice big kind of fillets on here. I know we were deciding up tonight because we have two little boxes, Universal Yum boxes. We have a French one, and I was telling the kids, I said, well, what do you want for dinner tonight? Do you guys want schnitzel or beef bourguignon? And they all were like, schnitzel for sure. So I was like, schnitzel it is. And then tomorrow we'll probably do beef bourguignon and do that. If our day allows, the kids, you know, school has already been canceled for Monday and Tuesday, although the way it's looking out there right now, I have a feeling it might be canceled all week because it is like Elsa has come and frozen Middle Tennessee here. There's seen like videos of some neighborhoods that are like tree after tree are down. We've been really lucky. We still have power. My parents did not, so they are now hunkering down with us. But, you know, we've lost a couple branches here. My husband's favorite tree, which is a smaller tree, unfortunately, we have lost. And we're hoping that maybe we can put it back up and it will grow, but I have a feeling it's a goner. But there's been lots of trees around here going down. So I'm just, as long as we keep power, I will be happy and thankful. There we go.
Oh, what type of tree is that?
It's a pine tree of some sort. Like it has really fine needles. It's like an ornamental pine. It has really little ones, but it's, I don't know, it's such a pretty tree and it's cute. And it's one of those ones that has been here probably with the house since it was built. So it's like 40 some years old, but it doesn't grow very big. And it's just was such a darling, cute tree that birds always were like, right there when I did my dishes. I could see, you know, there, or my husband did the dishes, he could look at his little fat birds that were there, but unfortunately, I'm not sure.
What is
Schnitzel is a breaded, typically it's Wiener Schnitzel, which is a breaded meal cutlets that have been pounded thin. And you dredge them, put some breadcrumbs, and then you fry them up in like a butter mixture. And so they're essentially like a fried cutlet, which are delicious on there. So I've got those pounded out on there. Let's get our pretzels going. That way when we come back, we'll get those dipped and ready to fry. But yeah, because we won't need that much time for it. Okay, let's get our pretzel dough out. Have it proofing in my oven. This is just a basic yeast pretzel dough on here that we have nice and kind of puffed up inside. I'm gonna divide it up and we'll make some little pretzels to go with our little dinner because you've got to have little, soft pretzels. Now, my pretzels are more like the American soft Annie Ann's pretzels versus the lovely German pretzels that have like a harder, crunchier outside to them. So mine are softer. But I don't boil mine in lye. I boil mine in a baking soda mixture that gives it their kind of chewy crust on there. So I've got my water boiling here, and I'm going to add in some baking soda.
Brenda sent you.
Oh, thank you, Brenda. We appreciate that here. We're going to add in about 1/4 cup of baking soda. We'll let that simmer. Again, that's going to help give the pretzel their texture on them, and then we'll boil them up. I'm going to divide my dough up here, which is a simple yeast dough, and then we'll start rolling it out for it. But this is one of our family favorites, and you start off with just a cup or a cup and a half of warm water, and then you add a tablespoon of yeast and 3 tablespoons of brown sugar. And from that, I'm going to cut these. We'll do 16. We're going to do smaller ones today. But from that, you let it like proof for a few minutes. And then you add in 4 tablespoons of melted butter, 2 teaspoons of salt. And then you kind of mix that up. And then you're going to add in 4 cups of, you can either do bread flour or all-purpose flour. Both work really well with it. And then I'm going to roll them out on here. And we'll roll them nice and long. So you want to kind of get it nice and long here. It makes it easier if you're going to do the pretzel shape. You're going to think, oh, that's really long. The longer, the better, because it's actually, by the time you get the twisting through, it goes really small. And there's our little pretzel. So it's about like 18 inches that you want to roll it for it.
Do the knots.
I know. I will say this is the traditional pretzel shape. I have this little method that is the loop, swoop, and pull. They don't look like a pretzel, but I can roll them out in a fraction of the time. And I think they cook up and boil better. And that's kind of just something that I've learned to do over the time for it. Just for practicality when you're making a whole bunch of them, but you just kind of swoop it over there, and then I tuck it through. So it's kind of like a modified little pretzel here. They each kind of turn out looking, slightly different, but they all taste the same. And it's the Elsie Jensen way, You just got to work with that, because if I have to sit and shape a pretzel every single time instead of literally the fun little loop, swoop, and pull, it can take you a long time.
Remember the first time you made them?
First time I made them, and I made a double batch because I was like, oh, we need a lot of pretzels. And it took me like 3-4 hours. It was so long. It was just like, because everything was, it was like a newer process. And this was like 5 or 6 years ago. And gosh, it really was like 5 or 6 years ago. And it definitely took forever. And then I was like, oh, well, I don't know if it was worth it. But now I have gotten to the point where I can get this out, like, because the dough you make up and then you just let and sit. But I can get it out really fast versus that initial time. But the initial one was, we're going to be very methodical. These were going to be perfectly shaped pretzels. Everything was. And then I'm like, you know what? Life happens. And sometimes efficiency is better than perfection, especially when we all just want to eat delicious, warm, hot pretzels. And we're going to have to boil these anyways, and then we'll bake them. But I'll get them rolled out, and then we'll get them ready to boil. Now, sometimes the beauty of this recipe is sometimes I will make really big pretzels. Sometimes I make smaller pretzels or in the middle. Most of the time, I'll make like 12 pretzels. I'm making a little bit more so that we have more options, so you don't have to commit on a big one. Sometimes I use this recipe to make pretzel like buns, which are delicious. And instead of doing like the loop, soup, and pull for those, you kind of shape them in like a little glob that looks like a bun that will bake up. But these are just so delicious. Here we go. And then when they're done, after we boil them, we'll brush them with an egg wash, which will give them that nice kind of shiny, kind of brownish color on them, which will, make them look a lot like a pretzel. And once you've boiled them, boiling is not cooking them. It's really just giving them that nice pretzel skin on them. You have to bake them, and I bake them at 450 for about 8 minutes. So it's nice kind of high temperature. And then they'll pop up and cook nicely. And these are so good. And they are so good the next day if they make it through. And that's always a big if, because they are so, so good. Because we don't just eat them with pretzel salt. I also make them with dessert way. So I'll rub butter over them and add cinnamon sugar. So you kind of got like your pretzel for your savory one with dinner, and then your little treat at the end. There we go. And loop, swoop, and pull. But there is, if you want to spend the time to make the really beautiful one right there, I do have that example. Just takes so much longer. And I will say, this is one of those things that are just, it's so easy because to whip the dough up, it takes, less than 10 minutes to have the dough wrapped in, and it's a really soft dough. So it's really easy to knead together. It has a slight tack to it, but not so much that it sticks onto you. And then I just pop it in my oven on the proofing setting, but you can put it in a nice warm spot. And then like 45 minutes to an hour later, you're ready to shape up.
Could you add chocolate chips, and when would you add them?
See, I don't think you could add chocolate chips to this dough because you are going to be boiling it and then baking it. So it's one of those things where if you did it, it probably you'd have to have them inside it, and it would be a big mess.
Maybe drizzle chocolate.
But yeah, you could drizzle chocolate, or, even better is when it comes out of the oven, you could sprinkle mini chocolate chips on top. So you would get it on top as a coating versus in the pretzel. Or make a little pretzel dip or a Nutella dip and dip it in there. Here we go. Okay. And loop, swoop, and pull. So I've got those here. I'm going to give my hands a little bit of a wash because they've got a little bit of olive oil on there. And then we're going to start boiling these guys off. I'm going to grab my slotted spoon that will help me pick them up and out of the water. But when I do them, I typically try to put the top side down first into the water. Now, sometimes they will flip over, and then I just use my little spoon to kind of do that. That way, when I kind of pop them out, I'll have the pretty side facing up when I'm spooning them out. And then we'll boil them for 30 seconds on each side.
Do you have this recipe posted?
I do have this recipe, I think, available for my members. I'm not sure. I think definitely for my members. I'm not sure if I have a freebie for everyone. But I have made this dough, I believe, on there. So there's several videos on how to make the pretzel dough as well for this available for it. But I do know I have a recipe card for our members. And, I am on the process of working on my cookbook. So this will definitely be one of my recipes in my cookbook because this is a family favorite. And it's so, so, so delicious. And it's such a tender and soft dough. It's just, like I said, it's so delicious. And I will pop these over. And give it a little flip and boil it on the other side for about 30 seconds, and then we'll spoon them out when we do that. And You can boil them up to a minute on each side if you want a slightly thicker like crust on it, similar to a bagel. I like the 30 seconds on it. And it's always a 30 seconds, give or take a few. You just want that to kind of seal in the moisture to keep the inside of your pretzel just delicious. And it's what changes it from a roll to a pretzel.
Mary sent you a gift.
Well, thank you, Mary. We appreciate that. Okay, I'm going to get my first one out, give it a little shake. Make sure we don't bring any extra water with us. And you can see once it boils up, it already actually expands inside a little bit in size. And it goes pretty fast once you're kind of going there. I find that I can boil quite a few at a time. So get our first round in. We'll drop these guys in. Now, when you're doing this, you want to do it in a good size sauce pot where you can truly dunk your pretzels over. I made the mistake once of doing it in one of my saute pans, thinking, oh, I didn't realize how much I relied on like the poking and the dumping step to flip them over. But it does, because if you have to try to pick them up and flip them over, then you are splashing yourself with boiling water, and that's never a good thing. So we'll get these and flip them, a little dunk. And all you do is you just give them a little poke to flip them over, and easy peasy. So it's as simple as that. I always say don't put too many in at one time, simply because if by the time you drop them in and you were to put in one at a time, you're not going to remember how many you put in there and which one you started with. So I always just do a row at a time. It just makes it a little bit easier so I don't overboil or underboil any of them. There we go. And again, always shake off a little bit of that extra moisture. It always looks a little dimpled when you're coming right out of the water right now, but when they bake up, they'll expand and have a nice smoother like kind of top on them. Let's get our next round in. Slide these guys. And where is that little pop-up for it? But the process is it's actually kind of similar to making a bagel in the sense that you boil off. My main difference is when I boil my pretzels, I boil them in a baking soda bath. But when I do my bagels, which are a sourdough bagel, I boil them in a honey bath, which gives them a really rich kind of color to the skin of the bagel. And a slightly different texture, but not much different. I'll get that here. And give it a little pop.
Judy gave you a fair act.
Thank you. That's so funny. We were was watching was it on like Discovery Network? It was Joanna Gaines, their new mountain house, and apparently she's really terrified of bears, and they had bear visitors at their house a couple of times. And I would be like, you know what? I don't know if I would love, I love like when we went to Anakeesta, we saw 3 bears, and I was like, oh, this is so fascinating, but I don't know if I'd want to live necessarily with potentially bears as like my neighbors. Because if they found our trash, they would probably become really close neighbors. They'd be like waiting outside our window and be like, where's our plate? Here, and we'll drop these last little bits in. And we'll get those boiling. We'll pop those over. While those are waiting to boil, we can work on getting our flour for our dredging seasoned up for it. We're doing a little bit different than we do our regular type kind of dredging. We're going to go into our flour, then into our egg, and then into a bowl of panko breadcrumbs. So it's going to give our second coating is going to be a really crunchy coating, which will make it just taste delicious, but slightly different than where I put my seasoned bread panko normally in it.
So you have a question for the pretzels? Do you use lye?
I do not use lye. I use baking soda instead in my thing. So it gives a slightly different texture to it. So it's not as crunchy, but it's not as caustic. I don't like to mess with lye. I know lots of people do it, but if I were to do it, I would be the one that would have a catastrophic accident. It would be me. You would be seeing me in the ER later tonight. That would be my show. So baking soda. And the nice thing is baking soda is something that pretty much everybody has in their cupboard. Lye is something that is a specialty ingredient that you have to typically order because you can't really just find it at your local grocery store. So I like to use things that I have lying around versus having to have specialty ingredients. There we go. And that. And the nice thing is this baking soda water cleans out my sink really well. Okay, we're not gonna pop them in the oven just yet, but we will brush them with a little bit of egg wash. So let me grab a little bowl right here, and I'm gonna steal one of these little eggs because I don't think we'll need. And then we'll mix in about a teaspoon or so with our egg. So we have a little bit of water in here. And then we'll brush it over. And this egg wash is going to give our pretzels their lovely brown coloring on it. And just make them kind of give that shiny brown, make them really pretty. If you don't put this on there, then they're going to have just a very pale look to them. So we'll mix this up. Here. That should be good. And then we'll brush each pretzel over the top. Make sure you get in every little nook and cranny of your pretzel so that, because you'll know if you miss the spot because it won't be shiny and pretty there. I mean, it's purely for just decorative, but you want your pretzel to be pretty. So brush these guys around. And pop it off on here. We've got our nice little, they boiled them off. And again, this is a yeast dough. These aren't sourdough pretzels. This is one of those recipes where my son was like, you cannot change this at all to a yeast or a sourdough recipe. And I've been tempted to try to make some sourdough pretzels just to see if he would like them, but this is such a family favorite that I'm not going to even attempt to change this recipe. If I do something, I'm going to do something completely different. Maybe just do like pretzel bites or something. But again, I think that's a nice thing. I always like to change it up to where I have a good mixture of both yeast and sourdough recipes, trying to change it up. So, because they're slightly different flavors and on there. Like my son, I'm going to grab that little snotty piece of egg. There we go. He really loved, I made like mock Texas Roadhouse rolls, and he loves a good yeast bread because he likes the softer crust versus the crunchier crust. And he always talks about how the sourdough has a sour flavor to it. And I was like, I mean, it does a little bit, but I think he can really taste it. Just some people have stronger taste buds. So he really loves anything I do with yeast. And he's told me, he's like, you can't change your cinnamon roll recipe, and you're not allowed to change your pretzels or my saffron buns. Those are my 3 recipes that he was like, you cannot change these at all. Okay. Got them. We'll pop these in the oven in just a second, but I want to get this kind of dredge going and at least get a couple of them popped in and heated up. So we put in about a cup there. This, again, is going to be fairly simple in the flavor kind of processing.
Instead of an egg wash, could you use chicken stock?
No, the egg wash you really are going to need for the shiny coating on it. It's just like with brioche bread, it's going to give you a little shine to it. And chicken broth, or I've seen it with milk or whatnot, will give you a little bit of a brownish color to it, but it's going to be a matte color. This is going to give you that nice shine. We're going to put our panko breadcrumbs in here. Having a good amount. And then for our base seasoning here, slide this out. We're just keeping it really simple. Pepper and garlic salt. Because with schnitzel, it's very, very simple. Now you can add more and more flavors if you want to, but the beauty of it is its simplicity for it than, versus adding a bunch of different flavor profiles. So I'm sticking with just the garlic salt and the black pepper. I'm adding a good amount because I need to season it up well. But this, and then we're going to be cooking it in an oil and butter mixture, which will add another level of flavor to it. So not going crazy like I do when I do my other chickens or stuff like that. More simple. And of course, my little Universal Yums box came with German mustard, which is suggested to use on it. I'm going to have all my kids try it, but they don't really love mustard. So we'll see. When I first saw it and I was looking at it and I was like, because this looks like the tube of caviar that my mom loves to eat. And I was like, oh, they gave us caviar in our box. Good thing it's not, it's mustard. But that was my first thought, which would be a really bougie box. Okay. Let's get a little bit of our oil heating up here.
Yeah, question. Did you get any snow or ice?
We got about 3 to 4 inches of snow, followed by lots of ice, which has not been great. Lots of trees down, lots of people without power. We are fortunately with power. So it's been a lot of ice, I will say. It's pretty devastating how much kind of destruction it's caused around here. Just seeing lots of videos of the neighborhoods and trees down, how many you can just see from our windows. That's kind of the sad part about it. But, we've been really fortunate. We've just lost one small tree and then a couple of branches. But the ice storm is still young, and while we're not expected to get any more, we're not expected to get very warm here. So it's just if the trees can hold on for about a week with, freezing temperatures, you just worry that they'll break under the weight of it, the stress. So we're going to whip up our eggs here. And then I'm going to get my oil heating up. Once it's hot, I'll bring it down to medium. I'm going to add in some butter. And then we'll kind of cook up our things. We're going to cook it over a medium heat. You want to go lower and slower. That way you'll get a nice golden crust. You don't have to worry about your butter, the milk solids in your butter burning as much, but you'll get that nice flavor. Okay. Now we're going to do kind of make our little station here. So I'm going to go through. We'll first do everyone in the flour. That way we can be kind of done with this part. So we're coating up, doing our first dredge in this, and then we're done with this flour because our last coating is going to be just panko breadcrumbs, which is going to give us more of a crust on it, which will be delicious. Here. But here's just our pork tenderloin that we've kind of coated up or pounded out nice and thin. So that way it will cook up nicely. I'm only going to be able to do probably 2 at a time because these are huge. But then, we'll cut up our bacon. We'll get our bacon cooking for both. Our bacon's going to go with our potatoes and our cabbage. We're going to do kind of a fried cabbage, a German fried potato, because I just have these little bits of it left over. So just have a nice little thing, but I'm really excited to do our little Universal Yum box in Germany. I was looking at all the little treats in there and I'm like, oh, these look good. But you never know. Sometimes in your mind, you're like, oh, this is going to be so good. And then you're like, wow, this is not what I expected. But I'm very, very interested after spent a lot of time in Germany. So we'll see. Although there was one of them was like a hot dog chip. So I'm be very interested on this hot dog chip. Right, or it's maybe a puff. I don't know. So I'll be very interested. There we go. And we'll get this last guy kind of puffed around, coated up. There we go. And now we're going to go into our mixture here with our egg, kind of coat and mix it around, and then into our panko breadcrumbs. Now you could also use a regular breadcrumb for this as well. If you want to. The panko adds a nice crunch, but regular is also like traditional. But I love panko. This is giving you a much crispier on here than, as you can see, than are my traditional when I fry it up. It's not, doesn't have quite as many breadcrumbs on there, but that's what makes this really lovely too. There we go. See, I think I'm ready to, I think it's warm that I can add my butter in here. Okay, let me get my hands a quick rinse. Kind of do this in stages because I think I'm ready to add in a little bit of butter because it feels like it's nice and warm. Here. And this is going to add a great, nice flavor to it. So I'm going to turn my pan down to a medium. And we're just going to put, I don't need a whole lot of butter. I'm not going to go crazy on it. But we'll put it in there and let it melt. I'm going to put in about, I want to say 3 tablespoons or so. I'm just going to break off another little chunk. But the milk solids, the butter flavor is just going to add a really great flavor to this, which will be absolutely lovely. But it helps it to where you don't have, you can fry, a lot of times they fry it in just butter, but you need to use a clarified butter because you do have to worry about the milk solids. This allows you to heat it at a slightly higher temperature, use a lot less butter, but get some of that great butter flavor in it. So I'm going to pop my first ones in. And these should cook up fairly fast because they are thin. Looks like we have just enough room for 2. I'm going to rotate my pan just a little bit and we'll go through and we'll crust those up. I'm going to get my other pan over here. We'll get some bacon going. That way we can get our potatoes frying up here in just a second. We're also going to use some of this bacon in our cabbage. My kitchen shears. And then we'll pop our pretzels in the oven here in just a second. I'm going to just cut it in half. That way I'll have this for my cabbage and this in here. And so the potatoes, we'll add a little bit of butter too, but we'll have this kind of this nice bacon grease that our boiled potatoes, after we give them a chop, we'll kind of fry them up in here and it will give them a really just hearty flavor. There we go. Get that. I'll let that kind of cook around. Let me wash my hands. And then let's go. We can pop our pretzels in there. They can bake up. That way they have a little minute to cool. Because I find with the pretzels, you don't want to eat them right away when they're really hot because they're pretty piping hot when they come out. But if you let them sit for about 5 minutes, they steam out. Just kind of like a sourdough. Nice and high temperature, 450. And we're going to bake these for 8 minutes. Now, what I like to do is I'm going to set my timer for about 7 minutes and 30 seconds. I'm going to come over here. We'll rotate it, and then we'll bake it for a little bit longer because that back half bakes faster than the front half, and that way they'll get the nice, perfect color on them. But again, it's right around 8 minutes, but when you open it up, you let out heat, and so it takes a little bit longer for it. Let's get this bacon going right here. I'm going to check my potatoes, see if they're nice and soft, and if they're ready for me to strain them. Yep, they should be perfect for me to kind of cut through. Yep. So I'll turn off my back burner, and then I'm just going to strain them so that they're cooled off and so that they're not so hot when I'm taking them out. Let me grab it. There it is. We're going to dice them up, but you want to have them boiled so that they're soft. It gives them a different texture than a straight up fried potato, which is really, really lovely.
Can you go over what schnitzel is?
Schnitzel is like a thinly pounded meat that you then dredge and then do in a breadcrumb coating. So it's kind of like a fried cutlet. We have pork chops here or a pork tenderloin that we hammered out nice and thin. And we then put it in our seasoned flour, egg, and then into our breadcrumbs. So it has just really great flavor to it. And get here. And when our nice and ready, we'll flip it over and on the other side. Get in there. Just like to rotate. Again, cook it over a medium heat, nice and low on there. I think I'm going to grab some more egg just because we're looking kind of like I'm going to need some more. They're pretty big cutlets, and I don't want to run out. And since my hands are clean right now, we'll add some more in, and I'll add a little bit more panko breadcrumbs too. This is a heavy breadcrumb one, but the crunch on the schnitzel is wonderful and will be to die for. Delicious. We're going to get this for our cabbage here in just a second. I always sit there and I'm like, I need to find a way to fit more pans on here. I think we're going to do it over here. Let me grab a little trivet for my potatoes. That way they're out of the way. And then I'm going to get some of this bacon cooking for our cabbage so that can start to cook up. But let's see. I think these might be ready. You can see our schnitzel right here is starting to get a nice golden crisping around the edging. Look at that beautiful golden brown color to it. So I'll slide this guy right underneath here. Beautiful. And that's that mixture of that being like fried in that oil and that butter. Those breadcrumbs really toast up nicely on here for this. You know what? I think since I have a good amount of bacon here, I'm actually going to use a little bit of this bacon for my cabbage because I don't need quite as much. I don't need a whole pound of bacon in this. I'm going to turn my back burner on. And we're going to take because I just need a few bits of, there we go, for our cabbage. Now, with our schnitzel, when we take it out, I'm going to put it on paper towels to soak up the extra oil, which will leave it nice and crispy. So I'm going to put out a baking sheet here, lined with some paper towels. And that way, when we transfer it, it will soak up that extra oil on there, and it will leave it nice and like crispy. Don't just leave it on a flat surface. If you don't want to do the paper towels, you can do you can put it on like a cookie cooling rack, and it can with a tray underneath, and it can drip down and collect. That also works really well. I just find that the paper towels soak up a little bit of extra and leaves it a bit more crispy. Okay, let's get, because we're going to be ready to pop our next ones in just a second. I'm going to put some more of my crumbs in here. And we'll get these guys ready to go in. So just kind of coat it up. And then we'll go in to our breadcrumb mixture here. Or, yep, our panko breadcrumbs. And we're just going to pat it on until they're nice and coated. Let's see. Looking great. Again, don't go too high on your frying temperature because you want it to be kind of low and slow to get that golden temperature while making sure it cooks all the way through. There we go. And because this is a little bit more of a delicate base on it, you want to be careful not to play with it too much in the pan, or you're going to like pull off the breading. And then once we're done with this, we'll get rid of our little breading bases and clean up this area just a little bit. We'll work on our potatoes and our cabbage, which will cook up now that the potatoes are pretty much boiled.
And what kind of crumbs are you using?
These are panko breadcrumbs, so just a plain crispy panko breadcrumb on there. They give you more crunch than a traditional breadcrumb, and then actually add a little bit more.
And where do you find those bowls?
These bowls are actually from Target. They're in the Chip and Joanna Gaines collection. I got them several years ago. So they don't make this exact one anymore, but they have one that's kind of similar to it out right now. But I do love them. They're actually like a super pasta bowl. Let me give this a nice little stir. Get my bacon back here. I'll turn down this pan just a little bit. Okay, get these last two breaded, and then we can kind of clean up our area just a little bit, and then we can work on the rest of dinner. There we go. So again, having it, this whole second dredge coating, be panko breadcrumbs, makes these so crispy and delicious. Okay, I'll get this last one in there, and then it seems like our oven is calling my name. So we'll go over there and get those.
Did you get any sledding in yesterday?
We got lots of sledding in yesterday. I made a nice little short, so that should hopefully be out soon, of us sledding and having lots of fun. Oh, we was posted this morning, so it should be out there. You'll have to look for it, but we had a lot of fun with it. Now today, unfortunately, it's been kind of like an ice pit out there. So no sledding today because it was raining and then icing and all of that. But let me get this through here real quick. We're going to rotate our pretzels here. And then we'll cook them for about a minute longer on the other side. So look how beautiful that is. I'm going to pop them in here. And then I'm going to add, we'll do like, I'm going to do a minute 30. That should be perfect. Give it a nice golden brown kiss on it.
Is this recipe similar to your pork tenderloin?
A little bit. It's slightly different. I use different seasonings, and then I have a complete panko breadcrumb crust on this. Oops. Let me grab 2 tongs. So it is similar on some aspects, but not as seasoned. The flavor profile's a little bit more different. Make sure you put your grease side down on here so that it stays nice and gets all that extra, like, oil out. Look at that. I will say the one difference is this is a little bit more of a delicate crust than mine. I always, when I make my regular breading, I add the flour to that second dredge, which allows that layer to stay on. This one's a little bit more delicate. Okay, we'll crisp this up. Let me clear this out of the way, and that way we can work on.
And what kind of meat?
These are pork chops that I butterflied and then pounded out nice and thin so that we'd have a nice thin cut. You want them nice and thin, about 1/4 of an inch, so that they'll cook up fast and evenly on there. And that way you'll get that nice crispy edge on both your schnitzel, and the meat will be cooked all the way through. Okay, we got this. We're about ready for that. Let's go grab our pretzels out of the oven, and then we should be about ready to work on our potatoes. I'm just going to move this so I have a tray to put that on. Now our pretzels we'll let sit for a second before we kind of coat them with our salt and our butter. Get my little, beautiful. Now we have our gorgeous pretzels here with their just lovely kiss tops. And you don't want to over bake them. You know, you give them to where they've got this nice little top on there because you want them to have this just lovely, soft, tender inside. There is butter in the batter, so it has just this great, it's a very, not in the batter, but in the dough, but it has a really tender, soft, pillowy, soft dough base to it. It uses yeast, but it's such a simple, soft recipe, but these are just like your soft pretzels from, you know, Annie Ann's Pretzel Time. So delicious. Okay, let's get our veggies and everything cut up for us, since we'll be working on our things, and get our potatoes going and frying in there. Okay, we'll slide this guy over here. And I'm going to chop up some onion to add to my potatoes for our kind of fried potatoes. And then we'll chop up our, kind of shred up our cabbage to sear up with our bacon. I'm going to add a little bit of butter in there. And then we will kind of chop up our boiled potatoes. They'll be a little bit hot, but we'll want to get them in there so that we can use them up. Yeah, a little bit of an onion stirring there. Nice kind of smaller dice on here. Doesn't have to be super small. Slide off my cabbages. We're going to be using a mixture of purple and green cabbages because I have a little bit of both, and I was like, oh, they'll go perfect with this.
Did you go to culinary school?
I did not go to culinary school. I am just self-taught. I've been cooking since I was 13 years old, so I've been cooking for a very long time, and I love it, and I've just taught myself how to do everything on my own, you know, just through years of practice. There we go. Give this a nice little toss in here. Got our bacon crisp up over there. We're going to get our cabbage in just a second. Add a little bit of butter to those so you have a nice little butter cook on the cabbage as well. So just about a tablespoon. Need my knife. Get that cooking up. I'm going to rotate my pan. And then we're just going to chop up our cabbage. I'm just going to take off wherever the big stalk is because we don't need that. I always say a little bit of cabbage goes a long way. We'll do a simple one so we don't have a super huge piece. But I don't want like this big stalky thing in there. I find that that one has that most pretty strong flavor of the cabbage that can, you know, the more, I want to say like, hard to describe it, but that like strong, you know, that sulfury flavor, those bigger pieces have it. So I like the more tender, smaller pieces. That should be good. I don't want it too small, but nice kind of bite-sized pieces. We'll throw this into our bacon and our butter, and we'll let it saute up. We'll grab that piece out. There we go. And that one. And we'll let those cook up. And then let me get my cabbage off of here. And we can work on getting our potatoes in. Let me give this a quick turn. Now the potatoes don't need a lot of cooking because again, we already cooked through them. So they are pretty much boiled through. You just need to chop them and cook them in that little bacon grease and that oil on there. But let's check on our schnitzel first, see if we're ready to flip it. Should have a nice golden brown color. I think I want a little bit more, so I'm actually going to rotate it and put this inner piece right here in there. Let's see. This one, pretty close. I think we're about good on there. So we've got that in here. Looking good, looking good. Nice and lovely. You can see our black pepper and our seasoning on here. We'll let that cook for a little bit and I'll flip that one in. Again, we've got like a big schnitzel, so the outer edges don't quite cook as crisped up as nicely as the very inner ones do. Okay, let's get these potatoes. They're gonna be hot, but they should be manageable. And I should be able to just dice them up and then we'll be able to throw them into our pan. We'll grab another little, coat these up with our bacon butter in here. Give them a nice little toss. Cabbage overboard. Okay, and then let's butter and salt our pretzels now that they've had a chance to kind of cool down for just a second. You're going to want to use a room temperature butter. So I've got one over here. And I'm just going to rub it over the top of each one. Just like this. And that will allow them to, the butter will melt over the top. You can always melt butter and brush it on there, but I find just using a little room temperature butter works wonders. And then we'll sprinkle our pretzel salt over some, and then I will sprinkle cinnamon sugar over some. So we have, again, our mixture of dessert and savory salty pretzels. There we go. So we got our pretzels. Now, this is something you have to use pretzel salt. You can't use a different salt. It just doesn't work. But let me first, I'm going to check on my thing, see if it's ready to flip. There we go. Beautiful. Look at that perfect golden edge on there. That's what I was like. I think it's ready. Okay. Now we'll put our pretzel salt on. Sprinkle it over. Pretzel salt is very different than regular salt. It's not nearly as salty, so you really need it.
Do your kids ever argue about how many pretzels they're allowed?
Yes. Yes, there are. Actually, I think the argument is mainly between my husband and my oldest son because they are the great lover of pretzels on here, and they really, really do love them too much so that there is often a fight over who eats which pretzels, if they eat too many dessert pretzels or too many, because our rule is you don't take the dessert pretzel until you've had your one. And then sometimes like a sneaky Teddy will come up and take a dessert pretzel and he eats all the cinnamon sugar off of the top of it and leaves the bottom part. And I'm like, oh, you sneaky boy. There we go. But this is where you have a little bit of both. You got your cinnamon sugar pretzel and your nice salty pretzel, and just perfect. You get dessert and your little bread both in the same one. It's just perfect. Here we go. Let's get our cabbage tossed here. Wonderful. Pour it on there. And then we'll get our potatoes in, we'll flip them up, and we should be able to kind of plate up around. You guys don't have to sit through all of the schnitzel cooking on there. And plus my kids will want to come out and eat their schnitzel. So going, but I'm just going to give my potatoes a nice little chop up here. Again, this is a dish where you really want to use, I'm using Yukon here, but a waxier potato that will keep its form. A russet will fall apart kind of in the boiling process. So stick with the Yukon, the new potato, red potatoes. Those all work wonders. Avoid the russets. There we go. And if you don't love the skin, you can always pull the skin is really tender right now that you could pull it off if you don't want it. But with the Yukon Gold, it is a very, very tender skin. So it's meant to, you can eat it on there. We're going to toss this in. With our onions and our bacon. And it's just a pretty quick fry up. And then we'll add a little bit of garlic, salt, pepper, and some green onions at the very end. And that's kind of this one. I'm going to get a spatula out to toss those. There we go. Just kind of coat them in that nice bacon grease on those sauteed onions. Look at that.
Would you use Yukon Gold for mashed potatoes?
You can. I personally prefer russet potatoes for mashed potatoes because they make a fluffier and lighter mashed potatoes. But you can definitely use a Yukon Gold. It's going to be a stickier, starchier, or like a sticky potato. But I've seen it done that way as well. It's not my cup of tea. I love a nice, again, a really fluffy mashed potato. So we're going to put our next schnitzel down again. Put it your oil side down so that it has a chance to kind of soak up that extra oil on there. This guy is almost ready. Remember, we flipped him last, a little bit later. Let's get our green onion ready to put on our potatoes here. And then I'm going to add a little bit of butter into the potatoes. Not much because they have that bacon grease in there to help, but it's a lot of potato. And we only use probably not even a third pound of bacon. So little snippets in here to give it that nice flavor. And then we're going to season them up with some garlic, salt, and pepper, and some green onions. That will be so good. Here we go. And I'm going to just take the white part off. We'll slice this down. I'm going to get some of that wilted part off right down the middle. You could use chives if you have them, or those are all lovely. That way we'll be ready to toss these on. Now with the schnitzel, it's also very common for you to squeeze some fresh lemon juice over it when you eat it. It kind of goes through that nice savory flavor of it. But we're just going to get these going. Next one down. There we go. We'll have that fry up here. Let's get our garlic, salt, and black pepper. We can season up, and then we'll get ready to serve up. So a little bit of garlic salt on our cabbage. And then we're going to do a little bit of garlic salt on our potatoes. And then a little bit of black pepper. And then these, give them a nice kind of scoop and flip because you want those crispy bases at the bottom. But you see that bacon, and it's just going to be absolutely delicious. They'll be soft, but at the same time fried and so wonderful. Okay. So good. Let's get our cabbage here. Wonderful. We've got our bacon in there with our purple cabbage, and you can see it's got this just lovely kind of braised on our cabbage. It'll have this just wonderful flavor to it and be amazing. Okay. Well, I'm going to sprinkle my green onions over our potatoes, and we are ready to serve up at least our first round for it. Now let me get this kind of cleared up. And then we'll be ready to serve up. And my kids are going to be excited for our box because, again, we were going through and peeking at it. I never let our kids quite peek through to see what it is because then they earmark what they want. And I'm like sitting here, so everybody's got to try everything, you know. without researching or knowing any little bit of what's going on in the treats. And there's some interesting one. I said they had some hot dog puffs in there or whatnot. Okay, let's start off. Let me I'll bring this guy a little bit closer to me so that I have him nearby. And then, beautiful. Okay. And then I've got it. We'll get our schnitzel out here.
Quick question, is that pork or chicken?
This is pork. So we have this is our pork chops that we filleted in half, our butterflied, and then we pounded down nice and thin. Okay. For dinner tonight, we have our crispy panko crusted Wiener Schnitzel that we are going to serve with our German fried potatoes. Now that Wiener Schnitzel is amazing. We made it with our pork chops that we hammered out nice and thin, seasoned the dredging up with just garlic, salt, and pepper, and then the panko breadcrumbs for this nice crustiness to it. We have some bacon braised cabbage on here for a nice little, savory vegetable. And of course, with our Wiener Schnitzel, we need to have our wonderful homemade soft pretzels for an extra little twist of deliciousness to kind of go with our German theme with our little box on here. I'm trying to see if I can find the one that is an actual pretzel shape, but I think, this is our pretzel shaped one. It's our cinnamon sugar one that we'll be having for dessert. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, kind of show you what we're making for our family and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do upload all of our videos to the link on our page. So if you ever want to recreate any of these recipes at home, you can just go to our page and search for what we made, our Wiener Schnitzel and soft pretzels, and you can always watch and cook along with me again. We also have a link to our Amazon storefront that has all of our different cooking gear and gadgets in it. So I have my hex-clad pans, my knives, my cutting boards, all the different things that I use in the kitchen I have in there for you guys to check out. But again, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe.